Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the MetaManiacs Show. My name's Dan Green. I'm your host, and I'm here with my co-host today. We have Dillan Straube
Dillan Straube
and Jordan Syverson.
Welcome, everybody.
So this is episode 6 of the MetaManiacs Show. We've been doing this for a little over a month now, getting you guys weekly podcast episodes. And so just before we jump into this one, we are experimenting with our formatting a little bit because we want to come up with a format that works the best for you guys. So today what we are doing is actually, unlike our previous episodes, we are not going to have an expanded episode that's Patreon only. We are going to be lengthening the length of these episodes for you all so that you don't have to go to another service like Patreon to get the rest of the content. And this is all just kind of based on feedback we've gotten from some of our amazing patrons who have been supporting the show. And in general, the consensus is let's just make more content for everyone. We're still going to have bonus episodes that are going to go up on Patreon that aren't going to be related to necessarily exactly what we're talking about here. But if you want the full kind of basic MetaManiacs Show experience, you're all going to get it completely for free, and it's going to have a little more content than it used to. So that's just a heads up for you guys all. Now, today is episode number 6 of the MetaManiacs Show, and what we are talking about today is legacy formats. So as experienced TCG players tend to know that in almost every card game, new formats tend to develop, and especially over time, especially if a card game is using rotation, for example, where it's going to rotate sets in and out of legality, these formats tend to exist as a way to allow older cards to be played with the newer ones and kind of keep the lifespan of those cards going for a bit longer, make sure they're still useful for people, and so people who invested in those sets don't feel like all their cards just went to become worth nothing. And I'm bringing this up because yesterday Jasco Games held their second ever retro format tournament, and they are experimenting with a retro format allowing all cards that were printed by Jasco Games, which is the last, how many years is it, Jordan? Do you know how many years of sets that is?
I don't remember the exact. I think it's 13. I want to say 13.
Man, UFS is such a long-running game that it's crazy that Jasco's had it for that many years now. So they're working on this and kind of developing this format over time, working on a ban list and just kind of watching how people play in these online retro events and what decks are performing well and trying to tweak it to be a great format. And Jordan went ahead and entered because the participation prizes were great. I was unable to, sadly. I really wanted to get some of those promos, but I'll just have to pick them up on Redemption or something down the line instead.
It has been stated, unless it's a special occasion, these promos will not be on Redemption. They wanted them to hold their value. So all the PTC promos, formerly the PTC promos for this year, had only one print run, and they said they have no plans to make more of them, and they're only going to release them either at event exclusives or they're going to be for special prizes. So if they do a special giveaway or something.
Okay, well,
so they wanted to hold their value
and buy these off of somebody, but thankfully they aren't unique effect promos. They're just alternate arts that look really cool. So
yeah, they're foil as well, and they're really pretty.
Yeah, they're great. So anyway, Jordan, I wanted to let you just take the floor and talk about how you feel about kind of the retro format and legacy formats in card games in general, where cards from any or an extended or any length of time are allowed, or with different rules or whatever. So go ahead and take the floor.
Yeah. So my experience with legacy card games as a whole, just to kind of throw it out there, is I've played a little bit of Modern in Magic, which I mean isn't technically legacy, but I'd consider it because it's like a half legacy because Magic's been around for an eternity.
Part of this, yeah.
Yeah, and then I've played the Fusion format, which blends Score Z and Panini Z, which is a form of legacy, even though they're technically separate games. They're the same game.
And just to clarify, that's for the Dragon Ball Z trading card game.
Yes. And then there's the retro format that has just started with Jasco, with UFS. And yesterday I played in the retro event, as Dan stated. And I played a really sick Angels deck that I learned some new things about. But I also saw a couple of other crazy decks. And that's one of the main things that brings me to legacy games. Also, like Dan mentioned, the investment of cards as they fall out of standard. It's nice to know that I have a place to still play the cards that I own, so they're not just collecting dust. And it helps them hold value, which in some cases is bad, in some cases is great, depending on the game and how things roll, and I'll touch on that in a second. But the main reason that draws me into it is because there's crazy decks and crazy builds that you normally could not achieve without the blending of these old cards and new cards. There's so many crazy things in the retro event that I saw that just like blew my mind, that for me as a deck builder is just fun to tinker around with, because it's like you have a bunch of Legos and then all of a sudden you just get another dump truck full of Legos that are all different shapes and sizes, and you're like, holy crap, there's so much more things I can do with this. And it's just fun to like figure out all the things. And of course, along the way, you're going to find stuff that is unfairly broken, and hopefully it's up to whoever, the card game people are that are running it are going to find it and root out the ones that are toxically bad. Jasco has been, like I said, they've been keeping a sharp eye. They wanted to make it the Wild West for the first couple, just so they can organically see which ones are really terrible. There's a couple key cards that they banned outright because they already knew that it was going to cause like infinite loops and some combos that were just going to be not fun no matter what the situation is. But some of them, in my opinion, are starting to seep through. There's a couple that I know the community have been like, especially after this tournament, are probably going to be like, you need to fix this, which is, there's one with an asset card called Caden's Blindfold, and Dan's favorite card, Scarlet Meteor, where Scarlet Meteor lets you destroy a foundation to take an asset or foundation from your discard pile and place it into play. Caden's Blindfold is an asset that has the ability Form, Destroy, add a powerful attack from your card pool to your hand.
And Scarlet Meteor is a powerful attack.
And Scarlet Meteor is a powerful attack, which means you play Scarlet Meteor, you blow something up, you give it a bunch of damage with powerful, and then after they block it or don't block it, then you just pick it up with Caden's Blindfold, and then you play Scarlet Meteor to get Caden's Blindfold back to then hit them with the meteor, and then use the Scarlet. Yeah, it's just essentially as a loop. It kind of just got past the blindfold, I guess you'd say.
Oh,
so,
nice.
Yeah, so it's there. I'm assuming it'll get fixed. Other than that, there's some other stuff that's interesting that I don't want to say it's in the territory of like broken quite yet, because I don't know a lot of the retro cards myself. I'm slowly learning them. So there's probably stuff that I see outright that I'm like, oh, that's broken. But that's the mindset of me in Standard. So I've been giving it some time, because there's some stuff I saw in Retro 1 event that are not very broken now that I think about it with all the tools that you get. But yeah, I'm hyped for it. That's the main thing. And then the last thing I want to check on before someone else does it, because I'm kind of stealing the spotlight here, is
keep it.
The pricing of cards is a love-hate relationship with me, because I like that my cards stay valuable. But one of the things growing up as like a really poor kid who liked card games, one of the things in Magic when my early Magic career started is I'd wait till cards dropped out of Standard, because until Modern or Legacy really caught any ground, the card prices would plummet. And that's how me and my friends who didn't have a lot of money were able to like really play some of the higher level decks, is we just wait till Standard dropped out, and that's when we'd buy all the singles, because everyone's like, oh, I'll sell this, formerly $80 card for like $5. And we're like, cool, I can afford $5. I'll buy that card I've been wanting. And then once Magic started with Modern and it started getting really popular, that's part of the first, that's the first wave of times that I stopped playing Magic, because it was when I was in high school and I wasn't as poor, but like I had a job and stuff, but there was so much other things I wanted to spend my money on. And my plans of buying cards when they dropped out of Standard ceased to be, because half the time those cards would, more often than not, just increase in price more, making them even less likely that I could ever get them.
Can you quickly clarify when Magic started? You mentioned that it started catching on.
Yeah, like Modern started catching heavily on when I was in high school, which I want to say was like when the second Mirrodin block / end of Kawigama was like really
I can help out
to the
here.
forefront. Yeah,
I can help out here. So Magic's history, they introduced rotation quite early on at this point relative to the timeline of Magic.
I heard they introduced rotation after like 6 years, right? It was pretty short.
It didn't. Yeah, I guess I don't know the exact number of when like rotation started, but when they did start a rotation, they very quickly introduced these unique formats. What we now call Standard was called Type 2. What we call Vintage was Type 1, which is Vintage supported. Everything is allowed, but there's a restriction list. You can only run one Black Lotus. You can only run one Mox, Pearl, whatever.
What
all
does
that
Black
stuff.
Lotus do again? Since we don't have to worry about structure so much.
Yeah, it just a quick aside on it. It's a free card that you sacrifice it to gain 3 mana.
Oh yeah, I forgot. It's
So
like it's pot of greed. It's something that you
it
wouldn't.
just
There's no
accelerates
reason
you
not to play.
really fast.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. Thank
And
you.
they introduced a Type 1.5, and the Type 1.5 was at the time their well, not now I don't remember. Someone's probably going to correct me. It was either Extended or Legacy at the time. Extended being Legacy was Vintage, but they introduced a ban list, so there was no Black Lotus allowed, and some other stuff. Extended was introduced as a super standard, where it was the standard format plus another standard format before it, if that makes sense. So instead of 2 blocks being legal, it was 4 blocks being legal of sets. And each block was 3 sets. So they introduced that very early on. And Extended just never really caught on very well because it was just kind of like, it really was like super standard. It wasn't like old enough to have these kind of really crazy combos like Jordan's talking about that he enjoys seeing in games. It had some, and I did play in some extended tournaments back in the day. And there were some pretty fun things you could do. But it just never quite had the appeal of like, I'm going to play with the strongest cards in Magic, which is what like the Legacy and Vintage formats were for. And eventually, after enough time had passed, they had changed the card frames at the introduction of the set Mirrodin. And then another bunch of years passed, and then they were like, okay, let's try this again because Legacy was getting kind of too expensive, like Jordan's saying, because these cards have been out of print for so long. But like, if you want to pick up things like at the time Force of Will and Tarmogoyf and everything, those were like the most important cards. Dark Confidant, some of the most important cards in that format. And they were getting so absurdly expensive that like it was tough for people to want to get into Legacy. But Wizards had the unenviable task of trying to get people to still feel like
Keep spending money.
Yeah, like wanting to buy these sets so that they could use them down the line for a long period of time. And this is something that we didn't really touch on in our TCG turnoffs when we were talking of episode 2, when we were talking about rotation and its impact and everything. In that, if you have a good format set up for your older cards that people want to play, that's how you can ensure that people can buy new sets and go, these are going to last me for standard, and then they're still going to be valuable afterwards. And so Wizards set out to do that when they created Modern. And with Modern, they said Mirrodin and 8th edition, basically when they switched the card frames over, that's the starting point for Modern. So Modern is anything with a modern card frame.
Oh, cool. That sounds.
I didn't know
really
that's why they called
player-friendly.
it that.
Yeah, that's basically the reason it's called that. And so Modern did very well. I don't know what the secret sauce was. They started supporting it with bigger events. Like Vintage and Legacy really never got a good share of the like Pro Tour tournaments or anything. In Modern, they pushed it much harder. And it actually went from, just for an example of how well Modern did, before the introduction of Modern, our F&M tournaments at our local store, Paradox Comics and Cards, were typically, and this is at the point where I like started like judging them and everything. We had attendance of like 50-ish, 60-ish people for some of these F&Ms, and they were all there to play standard. So we had like very massive standard tournaments, and those are probably some of our like bigger ones, but the attendance would be somewhere between like 30 and 50 people on average, probably pushing up to
That's
60 sometimes. All play there to play standard. These days we have these days I don't know exactly what's going on right now because of the global pandemic thing, but more recently we would have about that many people in the store, but they are split evenly between a standard tournament, a modern tournament, which often gets more people than the standard, and then Commander casual play. Mm-hmm. And so the introduction of Commander, which is itself also a legacy format, I'd love to talk about that at some point too. That's a casual legacy format effectively. But with the introduction of Commander and Modern and the way they push them, they basically took a lot of the standard players and gave them something that they just wanted to play more, which is good, because it means that anytime people invest in these sets, we got people buying them for standard. We have people buying them for modern, and then they're going to hold on to them. And if they rotate out, then they can go, okay, well, I'll just play my modern deck now, and maybe next week I'll play modern instead of standard. And it's nice that people have that choice, and they feel like it's valuable to play in that. So I'm sorry, that was a long aside to kind of explain how those formats came to be. And now there's new stuff. There's like Brawl. There's on Arena. There's
Don't they have it's called like Kings or something?
Kings. I don't know about a Kings
Arena.
format.
We gotta hop
Like
on
it's
Arena.
like it's 2 players play a king, and then you have your 2 knights, and then you have to kill the knights before you can attack the king or something. I remember my local
absolutely
store in
nothing
Minot
about
had that.
That sounds wild to me. I
Yeah,
have
it
no
was
clue.
interesting.
That sounds cool. Yeah, definitely an interesting thing. But
It probably has a different name, and there'll probably be people that are like, "Oh my god, I can't believe he called it Kings."
yeah, and maybe I'll hear this different name and be like, "Oh yeah, I've heard of that one." That's normal. But they still are experimenting with Horizons. I think is the name of another one they were trying out for a while. But there's or maybe that was a fan made one. I don't know. But people keep trying because people want to play their older cards, because I think, like you said, Jordan, it's just fun to be able to kind of combine the best of all these different sets or an entire game's history to create like one super powered format or super powered decks or cool combos where things interact with each other. If you're someone who likes deck building card games, it's just something that appeals to you to try and find all those fun interactions.
Yeah.
Shout out to the Incredibles, because when everyone's super, no one will be. So I generally, like, I remember when I was initially getting into thinking about this and people talking about legacy formats and like retro or fusion. This was the thing that, like, because I love deck buildings, not to take over anything, but when I heard about fusion, I was like, not interested. And Mike Molstry was like, shout out Mike Molstry. He was like, but why? I was like, who wants to play broken games with broken cards and lose to broken combos? I was like, that doesn't sound fun. And he's like, well, but everyone's doing it. So, like, in a format where everyone has the broken combo that they're doing, everyone feels like they're playing insanely powerful cards. And, like, that never really, I was like, okay, whatever. Like, like, I was like, sure, fine. I was just dismissive of it. But hearing, the more I've heard people talk about it, and this is a couple years on, it sounds like a great time from a deck building perspective, where you're just like, I see this, I can do this, oh my god, I can do this. And so it sounds fun.
Like, here's the thing, you're a card game player, right? You, the listener, you're a TCG player, right? You like playing good cards, right? Like, that's just, I mean, okay, shout out to Dillan Hickle, I guess one of our locals who really likes playing bad cards. But generally, most people like playing good cards. They like playing good combos. They like playing fun and powerful things. That's part of the reason we like, going back to our first episode, part of the reason we like trading card games is because there are these fun, powerful cards to chase and to play, and to feel like you're playing UniVersus. You slam down a Spirit Shotgun after like having a whole bunch of cards before it. It gets powered up for every symbol that matches before it. So you play this thing, it's like, yeah, here's a throw, effectively a throw for 40 damage. And like, what are you gonna do? Don't tell me that you don't like doing stuff like that, right? Mm-hmm. And that's what you get to do in these formats. Yes, everyone's doing it, and you may just as easily, the turn before you do that, someone might do the very same thing to you, or something just as degenerate or powerful. But that's kind of just, it's the name of the game. That's how this works. And actually, I think a lot of people, then, if you come from a Magic background, you can kind of describe how any TCG plays by comparing it to those different formats. So when we were talking about Dragon Ball Z Fusion format, I was telling people it's like you're playing Panini Dragon Ball Z, but it's the like vintage or legacy version of that if you're comparing it to Magic, where it's like in Magic, you're playing a normal game, a normal standard game of Magic, you expect to go like 6 to 8 to 10, kind of maybe 12 if it's really control-y turns. That's like a pretty high end. And generally, when you're casting things that cost like 6 mana, that's like your top end card in your deck. And that means those cards should be winning you the game in a couple of turns, right? When you're playing a game of Legacy, you get to do cards that are like that powerful generally in the first like 3 or 4 turns. And like the game should be pretty clearly heading to an end at that point. Yeah, and it's just like it's the same game, but the pacing is different because the power level is different. And when the power level is different, the responses to things become more critical. You have, if you, especially in Legacy, it's like it's a format where there are decks that are playing the best counter spells in the game. And if you're just going to be like, I'm playing a bunch of dumb dudes and I'm going to attack you, they're going to be like, okay, what's the most threatening thing? Counter it. And then they're going to take care of that and then find a way to take over the game. And just the fact is you have to have those kind of answers in your deck sometimes to deal with the most threatening thing, or you have to be the equally threatening opponent, and just kind of hope that you win in that regard. So it's like, it is something that I think a lot of people who play the normal version of the game will enjoy playing, but you do have to understand going into it. And I can understand this being a turnoff for people, that it's like, it's a different pace, it's a different style, and the priority of the power of things is different, where like answers tend to be prioritized at an even higher level because you only have sometimes like that moment to respond before you lose the game to it. And if you can't just be like, in a couple turns I'll draw something to deal with it. Like, no, you probably will just be dead at that point.
Another thing that I really love about Legacy format, specifically in games like DBZ and UFS in particular, just because Magic doesn't have this facet, which is like, I mean, it kind of does. It allows you to always be playing with whatever your favorite cards are, and more specifically for me, like your favorite characters. So, for example, like the DBZ Panini game, I really like Trunks. He wasn't the greatest, let's be honest. He got really good in the last set before the game died. His last MP stack was like stack.
Super
yeah,
good.
just so you know, in Fantasy Ascension, Trunks is still like a very dominant deck. So
yes. And the thing that really got me hype about Fusion is Trunks has a lot of really good cards in Score. And like with those two blended together, I was able to make like one of my favorite characters, Trunks, be like a hyper badass. And he was a character who is, as far as in the small amount of Fusion events I've played, is like in the top-ish tier. So like I was able to play a character that normally was not the best and make him into something who's like fighting for the top echelons.
yeah,
And my favorite character. And even if it wasn't the top tier character, it's still nice that, let's say they had rotation in that game and he rotated out, then I wouldn't be able to play my favorite character. And it's cool that with Legacy formats, it's like you always have a place where you can play your favorite cards or characters, no matter if they're in standard.
So long as they have support.
Yeah, but I mean, if they had support in standard, then those standard cards with support are gonna continue
no,
on.
I meant like so when a game has a lower player count, sometimes it's harder
that's
to
what you mean.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
yeah.
Like a actual like community support.
Like community
Yeah.
support. Yeah, that's what I meant.
Yeah, and like I was saying, that's sometimes the key is just getting people interested in these, because a lot of times, it is just true, like how it was for our store for Magic before kind of they pushed Modern. Everyone just wanted to play Standard. It was just kind of the thing to play. And if you came and said like, hey, do you want to play some Legacy games? Like most people there wouldn't even have a deck for it. They wouldn't know what to do. So like when we were trying to play Legacy a little bit and get into it, we kind of just had to establish our own little group, and we had to go like eBay cards or whatever and just like and get it started, because the store mostly stocked Standard stuff. Like that's just because that was their bread and butter. That was who was coming. So.
Or you'd get the people that would be like, well, can I play my regular Standard deck? And they'd be like, yeah, no problem. And then they get absolutely crushed, and they're like, I don't like this format.
Right.
And it turns them off to it.
I'm not playing broken stuff. Why'd I lose?
It's and I almost thought about going into one of these UFS retro events, just like whatever, I'll just like use my current like UFS standard deck, but like, it's just because the pacing is different of these formats, you're just going to get crushed generally speaking. I have seen Legacy decks lose to Standard decks in Magic before. It's something I've seen happen. It's not common. But two, it's sort of defeating the purpose, and you're missing the fun of like building those cool combos yourself. But it is intimidating to get into. And Jordan, I wanted to talk to you about your experience of like jumping into the retro format, being still like a relatively, compared to some of these like giants
New
in the
player,
game, people
yeah.
who've been playing forever, a relatively new player. How was it just jumping in and being like, okay, now I have, cracks knuckles. I have a 3,000 cards or something. I don't even know how many, 5,000, like a lot of cards.
There's
to
a
go
lot of cards to go through, and I still like the first retro event I played in. My mentality was literally just like, I'm just gonna find like something that does something cool, and then I'll just build the deck around that. And it was primarily just standard cards for the most part. I built Dimitri 1 for anyone who's interested. There's a Dimitri in standard that has a cool set of abilities that are once per turn, and I like reduction. Anyone who knows me, it's one of my favorite cards in the entire game. So I was like, I want to use reduction in an interesting way, because I'm pretty sure there's going to be some dope old cards that weren't built around reduction that are going to be amazing when you play reduction with. And Dimitri has an ability, or the one that's in standard has some cool abilities that are all once per turn. And the other attack with reduction is Rando's Spirit Gun. I've been wanting to find a deck that does something interesting at that. Rando's Spirit Gun allows you to use once per turn abilities twice. So I was like, okay, cool. I kind of want to play Dimitri. So I looked up, because there's previous Darkstalker sets, and I was like, what does the old Dimitri do? And it blended perfectly. The old Dimitri has an ability where at the first form you flip an opponent's foundation, which anyone who plays the game knows, that's free denial of that's free denial of ability. So I'm like, cool, that's already good. His second ability is what locked me in, which was, as an enhance, you check a 4. If you do, you take something from your discard pile, put it in your card pool. He has a lot of stuff that does things while it's in the card pool, so that's why he has that ability. But what makes it better is reduction has a static ability. Yeah, reduction static ability, which is active whenever it's, in the card pool, gives all your attacks +2/+2, and your opponents counted as desperation. So I was like, okay, I found my deck. I'm going to play Dimitri and just put a bunch of reductions for free in my card pool. And then I'll use Rando's Spirit Gun so I can put 2 reductions in the card pool, because it's only a once per turn. So I just kind of like did it a finely honed edge. I didn't look like a lot of cards. I was just like, all right, I found my cards. I'll just kind of check. I just searched for cards that do stuff in the card pool and just kind of like threw stuff together. Most of my attacks and stuff were standard legal cards because I knew them, and I was like, this is a good card. This will be fine. Or I'll be like, this is a multiple attack. I'll throw that in there because being able to put a free reduction in on a multiple is good.
Does UFS have a card search function where you can search text and such, like somewhere online?
Yes, but it's not the most up-to-date recently. They had UFS Ultra, which was a really good like deck building tool, and you could search there's a bunch of good search parameters. You could search by like keywords, you could search by card type, you could search by set.
That's got to help a lot with like getting into legacy formats when you're new.
For the legacy format specifically, it's good because all the old cards are still there. They just don't have any of the new DLC kits. Sure. And anything like once the DLC kits came out, there's nothing in there, which is not the best, but I mean, you can just look at the Jasco website and check if there's anything out of the small pool that you need.
Sure.
But the second deck I was diving deeper into the cards because I had to get my deck list in by a certain time. That's when I had my second deck, where now I know some cards, but basically, long story short, to answer your question, it is still daunting, and I'm still learning a lot of cards. There's still a bunch of cards that I don't see until I played the retro format, and like people would play it, and I'm like, what the hell does this card do? Let me read that. And I read it, I'm like, oh, that's a card. All right. And it just does some crazy stuff.
Yeah, and I think the retro format for UFS is unique in compared to like other, if you're like, let's say you're a player who's like looking into getting into whatever legacy format for one of the games you play. If you're looking at something like Magic Legacy and you want to get into it, there's a million deck lists. You can just go like, fine, okay, I'm gonna go play Tron. I'm gonna play Death and Taxes. I'm gonna play Ad Nauseam Tendrils or something. You pick one of those and you can just like start learning. And like you're saying, if you're not familiar with the format, yeah, I mean, you're gonna lose a bunch, but you're gonna learn these other cards and everything as you play. With a format like UFS Retro, there isn't a lot of data. There aren't a lot of deck lists to go off of. And so that can be, and I think this applies to like Fusion DBZ as well. There's a number of deck lists because they've been running these tournaments for a few years at Gen Con and everything. And you can look at some deck lists there, but it's also just like a smaller community, a less understood metagame. And it's one where, just like the UFS Retro, the best thing you can probably do is just kind of like pick a character you like, find a combo, an interaction you like, pick a card you like, and just be like, interacts with this in the wider pool and try and like work towards a deck there. Once you have something together, no, you're not going to like win the tournament right away, probably, unless you happen to find like the most busted combo in the game. But you'll start to learn all the interactions, what works, what doesn't work, what you need to have answers for, what your deck's strong against, as you just play games like that. And you will eventually like get more of the card pool under your belt. The one truth with a lot of these card games is that, especially when you look at a legacy format where so many different cards are legal, the gap between playable and non-playable cards just tends to increase a little bit. Because there is the upper echelon of cards, of good cards in the game, is just that much harder to kind of break into for like what is the absolute best stuff. And the way it tiers down, it does mean like there's going to be like 5,000-10,000 cards for you to look at, but like a wider percentage of those are ones where, well, they printed something better than that in the future, or it just like it, power creep kind of pushed a lot of those cards out of like being super, super relevant. I'm not saying they're all going to not be relevant. And UFS is a game where cards tend to be just more useful in general, but it's still not going to be as daunting as you think once you kind of just get a basic like card analysis system down, which you can often port over from just playing the more standard format for the game to some degree.
Yeah. And then a point I want to bring up, I feel like I'm always like praising Jasco at like every episode for something they're
doing. Worth it. Jasco very often does good things. Like I don't play the game. They're worth the praise.
They are, and they do provide us with some of our giveaway stuff that we do for like new DLCs and stuff. So I guess they technically do sort of sponsor us in some ways. But
one thing I want to like hit on that I think is also a great approach that they're doing. This could change. Keep in mind, don't take this word as gospel, but because they're still working out how they want the format to work. But from what it sounds like, obviously now everything is digital, so you don't have to worry about having the cards in hand or anything like that. But even from the get-go, when they were planning this before COVID came out, they basically are stating that the older cards, they will allow proxyable in tournaments. So if you are someone who wanted to get into it and you don't have the cash to drop on those super old cards that might be a lot more valuable because they're out of print, you have the option of just proxying them. And the way they incentivize it is they're going to have some sort of incentive for having your deck fully physical. So like if you have no proxies, you'd get, maybe like a bonus pack or like some actual incentive for playing the tournament. So like you feel like you want to build the deck, but you're not pressured to buy all the cards right away, which I like because it's for someone like me who can buy the cards if I wanted to. I don't want to waste money on a bunch of cards that maybe, my first 3 decks I'm going to end up hating. And then I'm like, cool, I bought these cards I'm never going to use. So it allows you to, even if you do have intention of buying the cards, you can play your decks in a couple of events until you are like, okay, this is the deck. And then you can go all in and buy all the cards. And then you get incentivized for actually having the physical copies of the cards in your deck as well, which I think is super cool.
I haven't heard about that. That's an interesting, leave it to Jasco to, once again, just kind of think outside the box for dealing with this.
We got to find out who's doing that and just poach them for every other game we play. Because there's got to be somebody like in the background that's
I'm pretty sure
listen.
Jason's really in touch with the community like all the time. Jason and Tim, I know. There's probably some other people that work behind the scenes. I just know I see them the most. But I know Jason's like the top dog. So all the decisions have to pass by him. So
got some real trailblazers like that. And
now,
Tim Schilder too.
And another note, it's really good. It's healthy. The main reason I want to touch on is it's nice to the players for one thing, but it's extremely healthy for the format in general. Because when you're trying to get a format like that to take off, part of the reason, like you said, when people come into card shops, they're like, well, I don't have those cards. I don't want to play that format. This allows people who normally wouldn't play the option to just be like, oh, it's free to get those cards. Hell yeah, I'll give it a shot. They'll at least try it, which means the player base and community is going to be easier to build and get off the ground because the barrier to entry is so small for people who already have cards.
Now, the one possible issue I can see with this is that it does disincentivize, not necessarily, I guess they're creating an incentive for having the real cards, but it's a less it's a less incentivizing incentive then you cannot play without this card, right? Which means just talking about the like maintaining the price of your cards over time could have an impact where it doesn't. It still causes those cards to massively drop in value after they rotate out. Now that said, as you said, Jordan, that can be a good thing. Still, just allowing people to get into the format is nice. Point two, Jasco is certainly not stingy with how long their cards are in standard already. And as an argument I often bring up with rotation is just that with the way games naturally power creep anyway, a lot of those cards will start to sort of naturally fall out of favor anyway once it gets to a certain point where you tend to get a rotation to happen anyway. So it's like not necessarily a big deal. But the third thing I want to bring up, I think, is that in favor of that system, I think generally players just want to have the actual cards anyway. And I guess, so I went through this sort of roller coaster thinking about my response to hearing that system for the first time. And I think I'm landing on it's probably a pretty good system, because I think even if you have like Spirit Shotguns rotate out, but it's still going to be played in retro, you aren't going to, like, a lot of people who play retro formats are the ones who love the game and they want to play with those cards. And like, even when it comes to Fusion DBZ, I was looking for limited foils of everything I wanted to play for a deck I'm going to play once a year, like
I'm on that train. You got me hooked on it. And like, I dropped like $150 on Trunks name cards that are like the exclusive like GKI foils and stuff.
Jordan,
and I was like, I have to have these
the
now.
Bottom just flexing.
And you can just as easily proxy in that format as you can in retro, but like, I'm not going to go to this retro tournament with my Spirit Shotgun deck and not have the foil, like actual Spirit Shotguns, right? Like, I mean, come on.
The only thing that bothers me about it is there's some cards in Scoresy that were never printed foil, and they're in my deck, and I'm like, everything's blinged out except for this card, but there's literally no way to foil it.
You want to talk about like issues with bling? Let's talk about when they reprinted set 1 for Dragon Ball Z TCG, and all of the foils looked so much better that I went through and had to refoil every non-styled card on my Yamcha or my orange Yamcha deck, which was the majority of the deck was non-styled and like energy attacks. So like, I need 3 blinding energy moves, and I need 3 overpowering attacks, and I need 3 orange rage.
Judge,
what?
DQ. He's running 3 blinding energy moves. This card is
2.
Limit 2 per deck.
2.
Limit 2 per deck.
So I should have said that. I was like 2. But so it was 3 orange rage, 3 what was the other one? Oh my god, orange energy vault. Like all of my stuff was like Opus. It was like set 1, like because all of the good stuff was, like there was a lot of really good early set 1 stuff. Oh, orange aura drill. All of my drills were set 1. So like I had to get orange aura drill, orange consumption. Like there's everything. I was like, I have this deck foiled out. I spent 2 years foiling this stupid deck out, and now they reprint a new set, and it's all shinier. And I need to foil it out again. And then the game died.
Wow.
Immediately after I foil it out.
But now, speaking of legacy formats, I mean, that effectively turned Pansy itself with Fansy and kind of into its own legacy format now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where these cards are legal forever, effectively, as long as people are playing the fan continuation of it as well, or they're viable in Fusion and everything. So, Dylan, we still got room for you if you want to come down. We're going to be playing some Fan Z once things are a little more clear again. I'm going to be building blue resourceful Vegito because it looks super fun. It's my style of deck.
And keep in mind, he said Fan Z, not Fusion, because I know you were just saying you're not a huge fan of Fusion. Fan Z is on the similar power level of what Pansy was.
I'm interested. I'd have to look at deck construction and stuff like that and see if I can bring you. I'm sure I could bring the Yamcha that we played in the Orange Kai or in the Kai event, and he would kick the shit out of things anyway. So
I know you've got some hype new orange cards that I know Yamcha in particular would like in the Fansy sets.
Bite my lip.
They have some human-only tags.
Ooh.
Yeah, there's actually a number of good cards for
No,
that.
there was about a year where I was keeping up on Fantasy stuff. I haven't caught up since I've been playing Final Fantasy because, pre-med, competitive card games, hosting podcasts and weekly videos, and
you've been a busy guy.
Have a sex life and stuff like that.
Speaking of anyone who is interested in checking out anything about Fanzy, we posted last month or something. I posted a combined CRD for Panini Z and Fanzy. It's hosted currently still exclusively on MetaManiacs. If you just go to the top, highlight over other games.
Hell yeah. I like that.
Go to the Dragon Ball Z section, you'll find that combined CRD. I worked quite hard and in conjunction with Joey DiCarlo, the lead developer, to put together this document containing all errata and all rulings that were issued in both Pansy and Fanzy, and explanations of all the new things that you see that Fanzy has added to the game. So that's all there for you to check through if you do want to get, and card legality and everything is all in there. So if you are looking at getting into the game and want a resource for knowing how to build a deck that's legal and what the rulings are on various cards, it should all be there.
Just in case you didn't know, Dan Green is kind of famous. He's kind of
a big deal.
It's kind of a big deal. He's
huge. Not really a big deal, and especially in the world of judging for Pansy, it's Jason Toro and James Statmiller who are always
shout out to
the main guys. So
I don't know, Dan. You once held the title of Super Saiyan 3 judge in an official capacity,
along with them. But I was always the one lurking on retro, answering questions.
I didn't meet Ake through Jason Toro. Thank you very much. I met Ake through Dan Mother Green. So
thank you for censoring that for me, so I don't have to do it in post.
I was so close to being like, and get ready to bleep this. But
no, I would have been mad at you. So anyway, guys, that's actually no, I don't want to go out quite yet, because I want to talk about one more thing about legacy formats, and that's casual legacy formats. Which I kind of feel like
I feel like we've all been talking about casual legacy formats.
Yeah, well,
okay, Metro specifically is an official tournament. It's right now that the tournament circuit going on.
We've talked about Fusion a lot.
Right, but those are all formats that are being played, at competitive events. The one Fusion event per year is at Gen Con, and it's basically the one per year, and it's the it's a competitive
it's a cash
event
prize too. If I
usually Tim Bateau puts up some cash prizes, and it's a serious thing that you want to try and get into.
1 second.
But
sorry, I heard something vibrating.
Okay, but the there are games that run tournament have formats that are specifically made not to be in tournaments, which is like Commander, or previously known as Elder Dragon Highlander in Magic. And I think those are, some of the easiest to approach legacy formats. If you're looking at getting your feet wet or something, you're like, I've started playing Magic recently. Maybe you jumped onto Arena and you're like, I'm just starting to get used to it, but how do I get into a game with these older formats when there are just tens of thousands of cards available? I don't know what to do. Those casual formats, the nice thing is that nobody's out to just beat you down in 2 turns and shake hands. They're there just to kind of play fun stuff, and you get to start to slowly get used to what cards exist and what interactions exist, and start to familiarize yourself with the card pool in general in a much nicer setting. So sorry if there was a glitch there visually, guys, but we're just talking about casual formats in casual legacy formats in games. And I wanted to ask if Jordan, since you had some experience playing Magic, did you ever play Commander or Elder Dragon Highlander? Are you familiar with those at all?
I don't know what Elder Dragon Highlander is, but I have played Commander. I had a Commander deck.
They're the same thing.
Oh, okay. I didn't know it had a different name. But yeah, I played Commander back when it came out. I had a couple friends that I was getting into, when I got into college here too, and I played Commander a few times with my old Artifact deck. And it was great.
Oh. Who was your commander in that deck?
Not the best commander. I actually forgot what it was called. It has a weird name. It's like the mech spider guy who...
Memnarch.
Yeah, Memnarch. I wanted to say Memnarch, but I was like, no, that's my favorite card, which is Memnites. But yeah, I had Memnarch because I was like, hell yeah, I'm just gonna grab someone's turn and do some crazy stuff. But he's a bit too slow in Commander
Sure.
with all the actual Commander like printed card.
Yeah, the thing is, since they started printing cards specifically for that format, which is another interesting thing, is that Magic now prints cards that are only legal in legacy formats and not necessarily like they're not standard legal when they're printed. They've definitely changed kind of the power dynamic of cards in Commander from when it first was a thing. But I just wanted to bring that up because that is another option. It's another facet of legacy formats, is that they're games that when they get big enough can often develop these casual only formats. And like a lot of people going into other games like Dragon Ball Super, some people have put together a rule set for like playing Commander with Super.
Final Fantasy has a Commander-esque too.
Oh,
by the way,
there you go.
Yeah.
And I know cube drafting, which is another way to like play old cards for a long time, is something that is done in Final Fantasy as well, right, Dylan?
Cube, I believe, is supposed to be officially supported. It was going to be this competitive season, but there was a big, obviously, turnarounds with that. So it was going to be Cube.
Cube was going to be officially supported.
I think there was an official Cube list done, and they updated it as well. And there was going to be Cube draft was going to be the draft in competitive events. Yeah.
Oh, that is really interesting because
it's super well done. It is,
but it's tough to prepare for a Cube draft without having a cube, right? So you'd have to like build that or proxy it in order to like
Everyone
practice
had to build a
for
cube.
it. So...
We've got a cube build if you want to play it.
Well, yeah, actually that'd be fun. I'd love to sometime. So
sure.
I'll take you up on that. Because I do like Final Fantasy. Just can't commit to like playing it actively with other things.
Into it. It's an easy way to get in, especially if one of your friends has it.
So I guess that's kind of what I wanted to touch on, the casual formats as well. But there's so many cool legacy formats. We want to hear from you guys. What kind of legacy formats do you like playing in card games? Have you been daunted in trying to get into one of them, or do you have a good experience getting into legacy formats in various card games? Let us know in the comments down below. This podcast, just a reminder, is available on YouTube, where you can get our visual content and where you can get our visual glitches apparently sometimes as well, and available on your favorite podcast networks. And if you guys did enjoy listening to this, we would absolutely love if you could give us the usual, the like, the subscribe. If you're on iTunes, give us a good rating if you liked it. That sure helps us out in getting found. And if you are one of our upper echelon of amazing supporters and want to join us on Patreon, the link is down below. We will have bonus episodes for you guys coming up over time, along with our expanded episodes for the first few episodes as we were trying that format out. It's just $2 a month to become a patron and get access to all that content, and there will be other content and cool features coming as well. So if you would like to do that, we would greatly appreciate it, and it would be just so amazing in helping us continue to grow the channel and bring you guys content that you like to hear, and be a part of helping us make decisions like switching formats like we started today.
And if you like this new expanded version where it's all in one, and it's the new format that we're doing, if you like that particularly, give us an extra like. Make sure to give us a subscribe. If you like this format more, comment down below. Let us know.
We want to hear from you guys.
We appreciate it. This takes more time. It takes more effort. But we love it, and we're here to do that for you. So
yes.
if you like this one change that we just made, you little Timmy, watching us play cards and talking about cards, you Timmy,
or Tamara,
give us a like, or Cameron, or
no,
Pamela.
I said
Tamara,
or Timmy or Tamara, either of you.
I'm assuming Tamara is the female version.
Or
of
Cameron.
Timmy. I don't know.
Drop us a like. It's right down there.
Okay, guys, this is going on too long. I'm cutting you off. Thank you guys for watching or listening to the MetaManiacs Show, Episode 6. We will be back next week with Episode 7, and I believe we'll have a bonus episode for the patrons at that point as well. So, hope you enjoyed, and we'll see you guys in the next one. Take care, guys.
Take care. Bye.